It says we are live. I think we're live. Are we live? Yeah, we're live. So tonight's cup is actually from the Bouvet Island attempt at a D expedition. This was given to me by my friend Hal W8AC, and on the bottom, well, I would tip the water. When I drink out the water, he basically says, "Thanks, Ria, 7388, DXW88C." So tonight we're not going to talk about. Well, we kind of are going to talk about DX and some of my adventures in DX because I love DX, but we're not going to be talking about big home stations. We're going to be talking about going mobile. I've had a bit of history with going mobile, and it's been kind of a it's kind of a love hate. I would say mobile operation has enabled me to do a lot of things. At the same time, it could be incredibly frustrating if you don't know what you're in for, and we'll see how that goes. Anyway, formalities out the way. I am Ria. My call sign's N2RJ. This is Ria Shack, and this is Live with Ria, our weekly show on Sundays at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Time, 1:30 Zulu on Monday morning, I think. 9, yeah. And here we talk about amateur radio, and we talk about a technical topic. We talk about sometimes not so technical topic. Sometimes we talk about just amateur radio. Sometimes we talk about operating. But I want to share my knowledge with you. Next year we'll make 25 years. I can't believe that I've made 25 years in this hobby. Almost seems like a lifetime. I started out in high school as a teenager, and then I progressed through the ranks. By that I mean that I grew in my knowledge, and I did so by reading a lot of books. I did so by having some great Elmers. My message to you is read books, watch my videos, and also have a good Elmer you can rely on. One, and two, when you do gain that knowledge, pass it on. It's very important. It aligns with our basis and purpose. Our basis and purpose is to create a pool of operators, and we're primarily, one of our missions is emergency communications, but a lot of it is learning. So anyway, I did make a post on Twitter about the microphone. I'll give you a little sneak peek here. This is the microphone. This is a shotgun microphone. It's just out of frame here, and this keeps me without a big boom microphone in front of my face. So, so anyway, hi, I'm Carlisle. Nice to see you here, and I see you have a When All Else Fails. It's pretty cool. Brian, 88GI, regular to this channel, and nice to see you, Brian. Mel, KC2FKW, who's been waiting patiently. Okay, so let's see here. A lot of people. Ria, aloha to you there in Hawaii. And hey, J Solar Tech. Whoa, this is scrolling back. Yeah. So anyway, let's see here. Trying to see if I could bring something up here. I'm going to do a whole video on my studio setup because I am kind of making things a little, different. And I want to encourage a lot of people to actually get into amateur radio. And if you have some good content to create, I know there are a lot of people who are, interested in doing this stuff. I'm not a big time YouTuber. This channel's growing fast, and I really appreciate that it's growing fast. I have a background in television, so I kind of know some of the ropes. And I also do worship technology for my church, and which means basically I run the live streams and all that stuff, and so which is how I do this. So anyway, and please hit the like button if you like this video, and I really appreciate it. Share it with a friend. We are here every Sunday with a tech topic. After the show, on the community tab, I do post the question of what do you want to see next week. I think for next week, we want to have, we already have a topic planned out, but I'll still post a topic anyway that you can sink your teeth into. KD2GYY. I could look up my window and see him. Okay, he lives in the same town that I do in Northwest New Jersey. And Arlen De Lima. How many radios do I have? I have one behind there that you can see, which is my Flex Radio 6700, an iCloud, which is kind of doing its thing. But so I have a number of them in use. I have my Flex, which is my main one. I have my ICOM 705. I have a couple ICOM 7000s, which we're going to talk about. I have a Kenwood TS440. I have ICOM 756 Pro 3, which is a spare radio. I have an ICOM 746, which I used when I lived in New York. I bought that from Barry Electronics in New York. That'll bring back some memories. And I have a number of other different radios. I have handheld radios. I have a Kenwood D74. I have loads of Chinese radios, Baofeng, TYT, and such like that. Various ones of them have been presented on my spectrum analyzer, and one day I'm just going to pull all of them out, put them on the spectrum analyzer, and you're going to see to compare. I have a Yaesu VX5, which has been through thick and thin with me. It fell off, a building in New York and just got a tis but a scratch. Okay. All right. So on to the topic. And this is, advice to get my preteen daughter into ham. So, it's always, and we're always trying to get the youth involved. I'm actually working right now with a school club. So I think the way you do that is you kind of have to encourage them into, to get it into it as something that they could use for something, right? So the Girl Scouts, believe it or not, they have the communications patch. And then, of course, Scouts, Boy Scouts, kind of like is boys and girls now. They have the Radio Merit badge. And you could do that. Sometimes the school might have an amateur radio club. I got involved through a school teacher because, school teachers are awesome. You got to make sure that you support them in the amateur radio efforts. Drones, you see, my kids are learning for their license now, although I wish they would practice a little more. They're going to get it soon. I resolved to them to get it by the end of the year. So, and this is one of them who joins me on every live stream. And so tonight's topic. Oh, we also have two chicks in a radio where I have my friend Kat W4DXY, who's all the way down in Alabama, and she and I run a live stream. You'll see more details on the channel. Okay, all right. So let me bring up this little presentation here. Well, it's not. I don't do death by PowerPoint or death by Keynote, but yeah, she's waving hi. Okay, I don't do death by PowerPoint or death by Keynote. But I use the slides as kind of like an assist. So let me do this here. Okay, and I use StreamYard mainly because Nick Nimmin, who I watch, and I learn a lot of YouTube from him. He uses them. So, all right. So we're going to talk about mobile ham radio tonight. Okay, mobile ham radio is the art and science of operating while underway. We are going to be talking about land mobile. We're not going to be talking about maritime mobile or aeronautical mobile tonight. This person, Sean K5QBF, who is a pilot, this side of the radio, he has a channel. He's a pilot, and he could probably tell about aeronautical mobile. I just fly drones. I don't fly. Well, I kind of take lessons. I don't have a pilot certificate yet. I'm working toward it. But, so anyway. All right. So mobile ham radio. And the question is, what exactly is mobile ham radio? So is radio in a vehicle, moving or not, right? It's usually permanently installed, although it doesn't have to be. The most common setup is VHF, UHF, but also you have HF and you can have microwave sometimes. Now there is a limit in terms of what bands you can actually get on because of the size of the antennas and such, which bands you can get on effectively, and we'll talk about it. You can power it from the vehicle. It is most commonly powered from the vehicle. Sometimes it's not powered from the vehicle. Sometimes it's powered independently of the vehicle. Why do you want to operate mobile? Okay, so maybe you drive a lot, right? Maybe you're a long haul trucker. Okay, I definitely know I have truckers who watch this channel. And you guys are on the road, okay? I know, yeah, you all have your CB radios and you talk to your buddies on a CB and such like that. That's cool. But I know some truckers who are into ham radio, so that's another radio service you could get into. The cool thing about the trucks is that first of all, you have a big old alternator, so you have a nice big power supply. And I believe in some trucks you might have access to a nice big round metal frame, so you have a nice ground plane. So that's a good way to do it. If you're a road warrior, if you just drive a lot, I don't know, you drive for work, you could put a mobile in your vehicle. You live in HOA, so I used to actually live in an apartment in New Jersey. Well, I lived in several apartments. One of them was in Wayne, New Jersey. I also live in New York, of course, Queens, New York, where I live in Queens, I live in Brooklyn, I live in Manhattan. The only boroughs I didn't live in was Staten Island and the Bronx. Okay. So, wow. Earthquake. Okay. Well, I hope you guys are okay. But yeah, so I generally didn't have access to put a good antenna. I had a balcony, but to be honest, the cop out from the management company was the fire codes wouldn't allow anything to hang over the balcony. So, I believe they just didn't want people to do it aesthetically, although they could be legitimately fire codes, right? But I just, I didn't really have any way to operate a home station. So what I ended up doing was, in 2006, we went to Dayton Hamvention and picked up a whole mobile setup for the car. And I will show you that in a little bit. But that's how I ended up getting on the air. And I did I did DXCC on that. And that was a pretty cool setup. So anyway, another reason is you like to go to different places to operate, right? You might want to go to parks on the air. Back when it was national parks on the air, that was a popular way for people to operate. You drive into a national park and you just operate mobile. My friend Andrea used to do that all the time, K2EZ. Of course, she's the queen of mobile. Okay, she's the queen of rover. And you can actually, you can travel to different places, experience different terrain. You can go high up on a mountaintop. You can go off-road if you have a Jeep or something. Of course, if you have a Jeep and you're traveling off-road, you're kind of a little limited with your antennas. You're probably going to have to keep the antenna inside the vehicle. And then when you get to your destination, you hook it up because that whip is going to be flipping 6 ways from Sunday. All right? And
so you could go to the middle of nowhere?
You can go to the middle of nowhere, yeah. You can boondock, I guess. You like to be prepared. So one thing I teach people in preparedness is that it's great to build a nice home station. If you have to bug out, okay, that is useless to you, okay? If your home gets destroyed in high winds or some other thing, or lightning, it's useless to you. So it's always good to have a backup. And a mobile, particularly in a vehicle that you can go different places, or an RV that you can live in, and you have a mobile setup there, or an easily deployable portable setup, is always good as a backup plan. Of course, there are many other reasons. You might just like driving on the way. You might just be a nerd. You might just like to, to hook up things in your car. More power. Okay. All right. Okay. It's not without its problems. Usually the problem with mobile is that the antennas are very short. So because the antennas are very short, they don't really work that well on HF. They work fantastic on VHF and UHF, but you'll find yourself wasting a lot of power, and you'll find yourself, yeah, back in my day when Poda was Napoda, you young whippersnappers ain't know what's good for you. I'll be eligible to join QCWA next year. So I have to practice. Yeah. Yeah, you can put them into a backpack and hike up a mountain too. You can do that too. Yeah. So anyway, yeah, so the antennas are usually short, right? And you'll find yourself that 20 meters will be acceptable. Okay, I did most of my operation on 20-meter band, which is 14 to 14.35 megahertz. Had good propagation, even at the bottom of the solar cycle, right? 40 meters became a little bit of a challenge, okay? 80 meters, I kind of was pushing it. 160, yeah, that wasn't happening, all right? So you kind of limited with the size of antennas. Your antennas are usually low, so you have high ground losses, okay? So you lose your signal because you're so close to the ground, and then you're not able to even lay out radials while you're driving to take advantage of that ground. So you basically lose out either way. You're limited to low power, and by low power I mean you can't run the full gallon. Okay, you can't run 1.5 kilowatts. You can't run, even a kilowatt. And we did a Two Chicks in a Radio this Thursday about amplifiers. If you want to check that out. But I would say the safe limit in a mobile is about 500 watts. Yeah, Joseph, we're going to talk about all sorts of antenna options in a few. So hang tight. So 500 watts gets to the point where you can kind of run that without taxing your alternator too much. Beyond that, it's kind of iffy. You also have the RF safety considerations. I have a whole video on RF safety, RF exposure. So you need to definitely watch out for that. You need to, I think, beyond 500 watts, it'll get to the point where you might be overexposed to RF. Of course, if your car has your car is metal, and you could probably block a lot of that, and depending on where your antenna is situated, but you just got to be careful. Like I said, the alternator in power situations, most people drive a car with an alternator, which is an internal combustion engine vehicle. I drive electric, so it's a little different for me. But yeah, the alternator will be taxed. I think most alternators only have like 40 or 60 amps to spare at any one time, because today's cars are very power hungry. Things like catalytic converters and such like that use a lot of power when the car is running. And you have all sorts of systems. You have computers. You have starting is kind of like a momentary load. So, that kind of stuff. All right. Safety. Okay. This is something that we have to absolutely acknowledge to be responsible. When you're driving, operating ham radio, you have to be careful not to be distracted. Okay. And we'll explain that too. And then you have laws, of course, that deal with that, and laws.
It says see my video. Can I link it?
Yes, you can link video. Did I make you a moderator? I think I made my daughter a moderator.
Yeah, you did.
Okay, so she could. Okay, yeah. So the law is one thing, and I'll explain how to deal with the law too, because you definitely don't want to get into some confrontation with the police over your radio. Some people have actually done that. Right? This is my kind of one picture of the console of my old mobile. And that sticker, that ARRL sticker in the top left there. Unfortunately, when New Jersey had full vehicle inspections, they told me to take it out. So I took it out and I never got a replacement. I was going to put one in my rear windshield. And I had an Icon 7000 a little Tar Heel 2 screwdriver with an aftermarket whip. I had an automatic antenna controller. I had a video feed because the ICOM 7000 is so sweet. It had a video out, composite video out that you can actually feed to your external monitor. In my case, I hacked the navigation system to actually put in a video feed into it. I also got an audio feed into the car's sound system, right? I forgot which company, but I actually took my car to one of these places and they actually made an interface for me that used the CD changer input because I didn't have an external CD changer in this car. I also had a separate VHF and UHF radio, and I had a Diamond dual band trunk mount antenna. So the separate VHF UHF radio, I would strongly consider you to have one of these if you operate repeaters and if you like to monitor repeaters and scan. Because when you're running HF, okay, you're kind of like tied up running HF and your radio is running HF. Whereas with the separate VHF UHF transceiver, FM transceiver, you could be monitoring the local repeaters, and you can actually be talking to your friends, people in your radio clubs, etc. They could be calling out to you, or even if you're operating under emergency conditions, you're able to monitor traffic on the local repeaters while doing emergency nets on HF. It's really good. I also like that radio because it has cross-band repeat capability, meaning I could get out the car and I can have a handheld radio and I can use the radio antenna and 50 watts of power in that radio. And meanwhile, with a little 5-watt handheld, I could go somewhere, or even a 1-watt handheld. I could go outside the vehicle and I can use the vehicle as a crossband repeater. Of course, to legally do that, you must identify through the repeater. So I would identify. But it was really only for my private use. Really cool. Okay. So that was my mobile setup. And yeah. Yes. So this was the Honda. And so like I said, you have the issues, you want to get a good antenna system. You want to get something as long as you could possibly get. Of course, longer is better, but longer, the height you have to consider things like power lines. You don't want to be hitting power lines. I think the maximum height you could go is something like 14 feet. And beyond that, it gets a little iffy. The coils, if you have coils in your antenna, the bigger coils are usually better because they have a high Q factor, right? So you want something, it's bigger, it's better. Of course, higher is better. And you consider center loaded versus base loaded. So the coil could be in the center, whereas the coil could be down at the base. Trucks and SUVs or RVs or bigger vehicles are usually better for mobile HF installation, but sedans could do well. A couple of months ago on QST, Wayne Overbeck, N6 NB, had a mobile setup in his Chevy Bolt, and he did just fine with that. The power system, because your radio loads are usually momentary and they're not constant, you can use an auxiliary battery system. So an auxiliary battery system would be the equivalent of a house battery, right? So you have a separate battery, and I'm going to show you the separate battery stuff I used. And you could charge that battery with your alternator, or you can charge it separately and just use it independent of the vehicle power. Although most people choose to charge it with the vehicle. And you have a charge controller. It's better to use a charge controller for that. And we're going to talk about boosters, which allow you to use a battery all the way down to 0. So this basically is what I talk about when you talk about loading coils. Because the antennas are so short, you have to have some sort of loading coil. This particular one is called a screwdriver, and I believe it was so named because they initially used a screwdriver motor to make this. So the way this works is that there are little fingers at the bottom, right, that slide along this coil, up and down, and because of that, you're able to change the inductance, by changing the number of turns that are in the circuit. There's a motor that moves the fingers up and down, so it can change the inductance of the coil, and that's really all there is to it. Of course, the whole thing is encased in Lexan, and Lexan is pretty good. So, right. How much time did I usually spend in my mobile? So, I used to have a half-hour commute from Wayne, New Jersey to Livingston, New Jersey, and I would spend about half hour in the car on HF in the mornings. I used to talk to my Trinidad crew on 14220, and then later on when we moved up to Sussex to Wantage, that turned into like maybe 45 minutes. So 45 minutes to an hour, and I talked to my Trinidad crew on 14220 on 14194 in the mornings. In the evening, I'll just be looking around for DX, and I work a lot of DX on the way home. So that's pretty cool. All right, and okay, let's see the next one here. Here are some other antennas here. The one on the left side, I believe, is either Scorpion or High Q. But you notice how the coil is not at the base, okay? So some antennas, they have the coil right at the base of the antenna, and that's base loaded. That tends to be a little more lossy. These ones are center loaded and tend to be a little better. To the top right, if you have a pickup truck, you can actually mount your antennas in the pocket, in the bed, in what they call, I believe this is a stake pocket mount. This might not be a stake pocket mount, but it's mounted in the bed of the truck. On the bottom picture, this person used a trailer hitch mount, and this is where you get into the point of, bigger vehicles tend to be better at this. So, you have one with a trailer hitch. Even a car, even a passenger sedan with a trailer hitch can mount an antenna. It gives you a little more mounting flexibility, but of course, since it's lower to the ground, might be a little more lossy. By the way, Mike, K8MRD, he did a good video on the hamstick antennas, right? So the hamstick antennas are kind of nice because they actually, what they do is they're what you call helically wound, where they have instead of having just a big loading coil and a straight whip, although this one has a little stinger on the top, a little stinger whip, what they do is they have the loading coil helically wound all the way up the antenna. And I believe the original hamsticks were made by WD4BUM, I think. And then I think MFJ started making them or something like that. I don't know. But Mike has a good review of these antennas. They're pretty good. And you can then, use these. They're pretty cheap. The original hamsticks were kind of just like, they didn't have the stinger whip on top, at least not for most bands. So you put them in, you screw them on, and if you change bands, you have to stop, get out of the vehicle, change and put another one for another band. Unlike the screwdriver antenna, which is basically you can change bands, as much as you want. Right? So getting back to the screwdriver antenna, how I actually tune this. So they give you a controller, okay, which is basically a switch that goes up and down, right? You can raise and go down, and they give you, I think they give you one that counts the number of turns, and you could kind of memorize those numbers. For me, that was driver distraction I didn't need. So I bought something called the N2VZ Turbo Tuner, and it was made by a guy, N2VZ. So the Turbo Tuner actually wasn't too bad. The Turbo Tuner, it integrated with the radio's tune button, right? So you plug it into the radio, and you also plug in the RF in between the radio and the antenna, and would measure the SWR. You push the tune button on the radio, it would initiate a tuning cycle. It would move the coil while continuously measuring the SWR. It would force the radio to transmit like 510 watts. And then when it reaches minimum SWR, it sends a signal to the radio to stop. And the tuner would beep K when it stops, right? It would be dee dee dee, and then it would tell it that it's ready when it's ready. And it was good most of the time. I think It was just push button, change bands, and I'm good. So yeah, this was pretty nice. If you're mounting your radio, like I mentioned, I showed you earlier, right? I showed you earlier where you have this control, control head in front, and the actual radio doesn't live in front because there's really no room in modern cars for this, okay? What you do is you put it in the boot or the trunk, and I mounted this below the rear deck here, the rear shelf, and I just ran a separation kit. If you notice on the bottom left here, I have no way to point. You will see here on the left side of the screen, you'll see the little silver unit. That's my unit to feed video into the car's navigation system. And the bottom here, they have a hatch that people use for skis. I used to use that to store long whips. So I had 2 whips. I had a 6-foot whip and I had a 10-foot whip. 10-foot whip I would not use while underway. The 6-foot whip I would have that on while underway, and that was perfect from 10 meters from about I would say about 10 meters down to even 80 meters. It worked well. Beyond that, kind of hokey. Below the icon here, you can see the N2VZ turbo tuner, and you can see my messy wiring too. So, it's pretty slick though. Here you see my solution with batteries. Okay, let's talk batteries. Okay, the black box you see, the black box is a battery box. I had a sealed lead acid battery box. I had a charge controller in there that connected to the car's alternator, and it would regulate the voltage and do a proper charge on this lead acid AGM battery. And I would have a voltage meter on top telling me what voltage. On the side of the box, you see a little silver box. That is a battery booster. That is the W4RRY. I believe he's silent key now. But this unit, what it does is it regulates the output from the battery. So the battery is usually 12.6 volts, I think. And then as it drains down, the voltage will vary. And when the voltage gets low, these fussy radios don't like to transmit at full power. What this booster does is it will boost the voltage up to 13.8 volts. And then, it will keep it there until the battery reaches like 11.7 volts. And then it just shuts completely down. So this is a pretty neat little device, and I still have it. There are some other units. I believe MFJ makes one. You have to be careful when selecting these because some of these are terrible with RFI. If you buy one off of AliExpress or, even Amazon, you might get a garbage unit that will ruin your HF experience completely. If you get a good one that's designed for hams, I think the MFJ one is good. They have all the suppression and everything built in. And, it'll be an acceptable amount of RFI. I wish I didn't have to say that, but, it is. So, so it's pretty good. The battery, the battery setup. And this tucks away neatly in the corner of the trunk. Okay? And, I carried everything in this car, okay? I carried big not plasma, but LCD TVs. Carried what else? We carried Costco runs in this. This was perfect, but unfortunately, it got it got old. 300,000 miles plus. So let's talk about the most controversial issue when it comes to mobile, and that is the power supply and grounding. Okay. If I had $1 for every time, or 5 cents, for everyone who tells me that their way to install the power cables on a mobile radio is the best way, I would probably be richer than Elon Musk right now. Okay, but I think he just overtook Jeff Bezos again. So the first one I'm going to show you, and this is from WHJI, okay? He's a real good guy when it comes to things. This is how most people wire their radio, Okay, you see you have the two fuses, right? You have the on positive and negative. You have the radio, you have the engine battery ground, you have the starter ground, and the battery is grounded. Okay, of course this doesn't take into account the alternator, but the radio cable goes direct to the battery with two fuses. There is really nothing wrong with this configuration, although I think it's probably legacy right now. Most radio manufacturers give you two cables, two fuses, because for two reasons. One of them, some vehicles were positive and negative ground. I think most notably Chrysler had positive ground vehicles, but everybody else were negative ground, right? And I think everybody pretty much standard on negative ground now. So negative ground means that the negative terminal is connected to the chassis of the vehicle, right, to the frame. Or, I don't think modern cars really have frame. They're all unibody now. But anyway, they're connected to the metal part of the vehicle. In order to make it compatible with those vehicles, they had to have fuses on both, because you don't know if the negative wire is going to go to the battery and then the other one to the frame. So they tell you wire it like this for that reason. Okay, that's one reason. The other reason is that, there's some kind of, a notion that if you hook up your radio with just the positive cable and negative cables unfused, if perchance your battery, the battery ground to the frame is broken for some reason, maybe you carry your car in for service, the mechanic disconnected the negative lead, and then you don't have ground anymore. When the starter starts up, because the starter pulls an immense amount of current, it will completely blow it'll burn the cable going to your radio, because all that negative current will be going through your radio, and that could be valid. But anyway, this is the way how most people do it. I would reckon. This is the unsafe way to do it. Okay, you have the positive with a fuse, that's fine, but you have the negative without a fuse. Okay, so the same situation I talk about with the starter drawing all that current, you now have that situation here. This is an alternative, and this is actually recommended by Motorola, of all manufacturers, where you have the positive lead fused, and then you have the negative lead going to the chassis, okay? And then you have the radio going through the firewall of your car in the engine compartment, and then connecting near to the negative battery terminal where it connects to the chassis. And because of that, if there is a ground fault, if the battery's negative does disconnect, a large load like the starter is not going to go through the radio's wiring. It's just not going to work at all, period. And this is pretty much, a safe alternative. The first one, though, I think is valid. I mean, there's no harm in the first one. I just think that this one is probably a little more robust in terms of actually being able to detect a ground fault rather than blowing the fuse in the radio. So if you have an opinion, I'm sure people have an opinion on it. The other thing you encounter in a mobile is RFI, right? Of course, most gasoline vehicles, they use spark plugs, okay? And the spark plugs, they used to be bad, and now they're not so bad anymore, because most cars have coil on plug, where they have the coil pack, a little coil pack on top of the spark plug, and then they have low voltage wiring going there. So there's really not a lot of high voltage wiring, and it reduces the amount of interference. But you still have in older vehicles, and you have that situation. If you have an old vehicle, use resistive wire. I think most of them came with them. What about grounding negative lead close to the radio? stop noise. I'm not so sure about that. I think if you you know, if your radio is grounded to the chassis, you're going to stop the noise anyway. And we're going to talk about bonding different parts of your chassis to eliminate noise, which I think is a far more effective strategy. Okay. The filters, sometimes you might have to get extreme and you put filters on the power line to get rid of the alternator whine. And then an alternator whine could be a sign of a defective alternator. Maybe some of the diodes are shorted and you need to replace them. The regulator goes bad. So make sure your alternator's health is okay. Now, what we talked about is bonding the frame panels. And that is a good strategy, because if there is ever some disconnect between some of the frame panels, because a car vibrates and it moves, right? And then you have all these connections made, and some of the parts of the vehicle are painted, some of it might be rusty. You don't have a good solid connection in between different parts of the vehicle, and that will cause noise. If you take some strap, and let me see here, you do like this, okay? And you have the strap. Basically, bonding, you have a sure ground part between different parts of the vehicle, especially in parts that move, like your trunk or your hood. And this way, you're always assured that you have a good connection, right? Because you're not assured that this trunk is going to have a continuous RF connection. They actually recommend this in some, commercial noise. So they tell you, like, for example, and this shows a really old car. I think you probably see these now just at car shows with this big style air cleaner element on the top. I don't think most cars look like this these days. But to illustrate, though, they tell you bond all metal parts of the vehicle, and you make sure that you have a positive ground using flat copper strap, right, or flat tin copper strap. That's one way to do it. Speaking of noise, so I actually got this from one of the Motorola documentation. You have in conventional ignition system, you have basically points in a distributor, which is old technology. Like I said, most today use electronic ignition and the coil unplug. You'll find that this will be an additional source of interference. But if you run an old vehicle, you're going to run into this. The newer ones are really not, like this at all. And the RFI is a lot better. Okay. Let's talk about safety and local laws. So some states have local restrictive laws, right? And some of them are getting stricter all the time. You have a ban on cell phones. Some of that, it might extend to ham radio. And for good or for better or for worse, it's coming. Okay? We do have an exemption here in New Jersey for amateur radio. And my vice director, ARRL vice director, Bill Hudzik, W2UDT, when he was ARRL section manager, he actually helped get that exemption. And it is pretty much a blanket exemption, right? It basically says that for purposes of this legislation, of this section, mobile handheld device shall not include an amateur radio. Okay, period. So we're out of that, right? Of course, this doesn't mean doesn't give you a license to be completely dumb, right? It gives you a license to use your powers, your privilege judiciously. If you are operating in a manner that could, that's not safe, I think it's better that you just put off operating and concentrate on driving, right? An example would be that you have to change bands and you have to look at the radio and you have to go through all the menus in these modern radios. I don't think that's good to do while driving, right? If you have it where you can have like something programmed in a memory or one band switch, or you have like my arrangement with the turbo tuner where I just switch the band, push the tune button, and I'm good to go. While I can do that while still looking at the road, okay, I'm good to go, okay? But if you have to go and adjust a billion different things in your car, it's better that you just, stop at the nearest rest stop or somewhere and put it off, okay? Your first duty is always to drive and to drive safely. Use a hands-free headset with an open back. Okay, by that you mean that one that you can hear the surrounding traffic noise. These are always good because it allows you to keep your hands free for operating the vehicle. Of course, this is kind of controversial as distraction, I believe, happens more so in your mind rather than your hands. And of course, you drive safely, you obey all traffic laws. If you're pulled over by the police, okay, don't mouth off at the police. Don't tell them, I have privileges and this and that, because it'll only end badly for you. I think at that point you politely explain to the police that, hey, we have amateur radio exemption for this, and just point it out. And if they're still giving you a ticket, just take the ticket and fight it in court. I think that's a better way to get it done. Of course, it's not legal advice, but when you're in court, you have the opportunity to go with a lawyer who can do this and probably even set some precedent so that it doesn't happen again. There were issues in New York where this happened, and other states where this happened, and in most cases, amateur radio won in the end. The tickets were dismissed, and the police are now, they understand that amateur radio is not subject to these. Of course, this does not mean that amateur radio is not distracted driving, okay? It means we're exempted by laws, but at the same time, you have to use your common sense. Always obey all traffic laws when driving. Let's talk about electric and hybrid vehicles. A lot of same things apply, except that you have to be ultra careful when you're working in an electric vehicle. My car has a 400-volt electrical system. Some of the vehicles by Volkswagen and Porsche, they have 800-volt electrical system. I cannot tell you that is going to knock you on your behind faster than you can say, Tesla. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, it's kind of like you really got to be careful. A lot of these vehicles actually, they have points in them where you can shut off the whole high voltage electrical system, right? In the front of a Tesla, there is a place below the cover where you can pull out the high voltage loop and then completely shut off the power to the vehicle. So this way you can work safely. Their contacts would basically completely disconnect the battery pack. You can safely work on a vehicle that way. Other than that, there are people who actually ran their mobile off a separate battery that they charge independently. I think that's probably the smarter thing to do. I actually run auxiliary loads in my car off a separate battery that I charge independently. So it's not really pulling from the vehicle electrical system. Of course, the 12-volt subsystem, right, within the car is kind of easy to get to once you take out the whole, some of the shrouds in the front and stuff. We're talking about Tesla here, okay? And the DC to DC converter is actually quite high power. The only problem is that the battery they give you in the car is pretty small. So, it's one thing to be aware of. The other thing is the RFI in these vehicles is pretty high. So I think most HF operation is kind of like no-go while in motion. It even wipes out the AM broadcast band. It's so bad that BMW takes out, takes out the AM from their vehicles, and Tesla pulled it out the Model 3 as well too. So they kind of acknowledge that, yeah, we know our vehicles are noisy. We're just gonna remove your ability to hear the noise. It's crazy. Yeah. So anyway, so that's pretty much electric and hybrid vehicles. I know I have a Tesla project I owe you guys. I'm going to be working on it. It's just there are a few things I need to get in a row first. This is my friend Andrea, K2EZ. This is her daily driver. She lives not well. She supposedly lives not far from here, although she spends a lot of time in Texas these days. I've been to her house. I've helped her set up some of this rover. She did most of the work, but I helped her with the flex radio and also getting the microwave loops installed and things integrated and such. We actually ran the June VHF contest and we won in 2018, and I have a plaque on my wall for that. So we're gonna talk rovers in another video. We're trying to, I want to see if I could get Andrea on, probably with a couple other YouTubers and such, and we could talk about rover and such. The thing about this vehicle is that it's so high that when we were driving through Connecticut, and when we were driving through Connecticut, we landed on a parkway, okay, and the parkway kind of was a little bit hairy because parkways are low overpasses, right? And oh boy, it was nervous. Okay, it was nerve wracking. I just couldn't, I don't know. I don't know how we did it, but we got through the parkway. It was screaming. I think she got it on dash camera. That was in 2018. So anyway, that's pretty much the mobile operation. I kicked myself up, I don't know. But anyway, yeah, so that's interesting. Audio, video. Okay. Hello. Okay, good. I'm good. Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry about that. What happened? I hit the back button by mistake. I don't know. I might set up OBS on this thing and ditch StreamYard. I don't know. I was giving it a try. I'm here. Can you see me? Can you see me? Can you see me? I'm back. Okay. Yeah, it's delayed. Yeah, you know what? It's StreamYard. StreamYard, I don't know, for some reason I got kicked up. So that's mobile. And let me see if I could take anything. So Mike, hey, nice to see you. I actually talked about your hamstick video further up. So, thanks for that. And I hope you get people get some good information out of your hamstick video. It looks crazy, but it works. Okay, that's what I tell people. Okay, it looks crazy, but it works. I have a lot of other pictures of that vehicle. Okay. Oh my God! When life wasn't so topsy turvy, I used to drive a lot with her. We went to Dayton. We went to the VHF contest and a few other places. But she spent a lot more time in Texas now, so I don't really get to hang with her as much. Let's see. You can POTA in your car. Of course you can. Yeah. She used to do Napota. She was actually at Patterson Great Falls, where they have the water turbine, right? In Patterson, New Jersey. And she actually did a few more. Yeah, if you're I hope and I pray that you guys don't have any more shocks with this earthquake. I can see how that will be bad. I'm keeping everything crossed for you guys. Let's see here. I have Dakota lithium 23 amp hour LiFePro 4. Yeah, that works well. This, by the way, when I had that mobile set up in full swing, it was when lithium batteries were prohibitively expensive. So yeah, lead acid worked fine except when it got cold. And I had the unfortunate incident of leaving a case of soda in my trunk when it got cold, and it was pow. And I had to clean up the inside of my trunk. Hey, this is Smoking Ape. Nice to see you here. And who else? Aloha. Oh, well, yeah. You can carry the law signed by your governor. Yes. And I actually have a web page that I made for the ARRL, and I want to show you guys here. Now, this is not legal advice, okay? It is information that you can pass to your lawyer, and then your lawyer can then can then talk to the judge in court. And let's see here now. Let me share the screen. Yeah. So I actually have this. This is my ARRL division website. We actually tell you how to do things here. We tell you, first of all, if you need legal advice, consult an attorney because they're the only ones who can give legal advice. And of course, we link to the VC program. We tell you how to get amateur radio license plates, which are kind of cool. Now, if you're concerned about privacy, you don't have to get them, but it's perfectly fine to not have them. I just got them. My license is in a PO box anyway, and and if they follow me at home, who knows? Yeah. So I talk about New York State and New Jersey motor vehicles require a copy of your license. New York State DMV has an opinion about using amateur radios while driving. So what people can do is they could keep this and they could attempt to convince the officer not to ticket you. But usually what happens is if they ticket you, you just go to court and you tell your attorney to talk with the prosecutor or the judge, and then they show them this, and then you can deal with that. New Jersey has a exemption, like I mentioned, right? For the purpose of this section, an electronic communications device shall not include an amateur radio. Scanners, if you are a scanner enthusiast, okay? If you have an amateur radio license, in many states, it is okay to have a general coverage receiver. Now, the way the laws are worded in some states, it might be that they might say, well, you can only have the general coverage receiver capability of your amateur radio. I think New York's law is worded like that. New Jersey has no prohibition on scanners in vehicles. Okay, which I think is an outdated, stupid law anyway, because, people have ways to see where the cops are. Okay? They have ways, WAZE. And, it's not like people are going to install a scanner in their car to avoid speed traps. And a lot of police comms are now encrypted. So I think, the scanner laws are kind of not making sense these days, All right. Let's see what else. Carry a copy of the actual law. Yep. And yep, I also keep a copy of my ham license. I printed out my amateur license and I keep it in my car. I actually keep a copy of the full license along with my insurance and registration papers just in case I need to pull it out, and I'm not fishing for it, yeah. So yeah, that's the other thing. You have scanner apps on your phone. Another cool app I've been playing with is Flight Radar 24, where I can actually see overhead airplanes. Yeah. Todd, yep, by carrying the document of the law in my glove. That's true. Yeah, I'm not gonna argue with the cop. I'm gonna politely tell him, hey, the law says this. Would you consider not writing me a ticket? Well, I didn't say that. I'll say, but we're allowed to do this. And then he says, well, I don't know about that. And then he or she will just write your ticket. And then go on your way. I had some interesting stories about traffic stops. One of them, I kind of got pulled over in New York and Long Island, and this was some years ago. And then I was just coming from where it was my grandfather-in-law's funeral. My grandfather-in-law's funeral. Okay, and this was a big, Indian funerals are huge multi-day affairs, right? Multi-week affairs. And of course, everybody was all upset and stuff like that. And I applied for an ADSB. I actually got asked by by Live ATC to set up one for them. I think I should get back to them and put up one. I'll put up a little antenna outside on the tower or by the barn. So anyway, at that time, New York just changed their licenses to a new format, and then the officer pulled me over, and she was like, what's with all these dangerous lane changes? And usually the cop will ask you, do you know why I pulled you over? But this one got right to the point. She's like, what with all these dangerous lane changes? I'm like, I don't know, And then She said, "Can I see your license and registration?" I'm like, "Okay." I pulled it out, and she's like, "Wow, this is new. This is a new license." I'm like, "Yeah." And she said, "All right, I'll give it a break." And she just let me on my way. Yeah. Yeah, I have a barn. When we bought this property, we had a barn, and we actually have two house numbers, by the way. Okay, that's funny because one of the house numbers is the barn. So the original owner of the property actually bought two lots and then merged them together, and built a barn on one. The barn, I store stuff in it. It's fully wired. It has telephone circuits. I'm probably gonna put a networking in there so I can run a outside Wi-Fi access point. The barn, I'm actually gonna put my solar panels on there because it's lower and it's easier to reach, and it's easier to maintain there. So I have solar panels I'm gonna put on there. I'm gonna run about 12 kilowatts of solar, and battery storage too. That's a project and a half. So yep. So anyway. All right, well, that was my presentation, my spiel about mobile. Let's see here. So the license copy, it actually says official copy. So I just print out a copy from ULS, right? And it says official copy. I print out the official authorization copy. The FCC is completely paperless now. They're not printing licenses anymore. Any livestock? No, I was thinking about renting it out for horses. The neighbors just on the side of us, they have horses too. So, yeah. Well, thanks, Mike, and thanks, everybody. And have a great Sunday, great rest of the week. Have a great controversial holiday tomorrow. I don't care. I just like that I have a day off. The Federal Reserve Bank has tomorrow's a holiday, so I get tomorrow off. So I'm good. 73, and keep on hamming. This is N2 RJ. See ya.